Okay, so here's the opening question. Just think, um, true or false? Um, it's important to get students feeling motivated before um, start something like a project or a reading or an activity. It's important to get students motivated to start that activity.
Can you guys see me?
No.
I think it's always important to get them motivated. I think I need that before I start anything to be able to do it. So I'm going to leave it there. What did I do wrong? I'll be back.
So you would think, I mean, that sounds right. That sounds true, but a bunch of people in the chat are saying false. And why would that be? The reason is how motivation works is you start to feel it once you're doing something. It is not the thing that gets you started, that gets you moving on something. You think maybe, oh, I need to motivate myself to go work out. Nope. You need to overcome procrastination or feelings that you maybe don't want to. But then it's when you're going to start to feel the motivation is when you're actually beginning to work out. You're a little ways in. That's when you tend to start actually feeling what we call motivation. It's wild. Okay. So, motivation is something that I know a lot about, I've written about. So, I want you all to think about what questions you'd like to ask me related to motivation. And I'm going to move you into breakout groups so you can talk a little bit about that. So, start thinking while I put the breakout groups together. And I'm going to make this one fairly short. You're just brainstorming questions. Um, I'll put that in the chat. What would you like to know more about in terms of motivation and how to motivate yourself or your students? All right, head into breakout rooms. I'll see you back in 4 minutes. Mateo, are you able to get in your room? All right, so those of you who are watching this on recording later, um, go ahead and go into your Google Doc and in there work on coming up with some questions about what you'd like to know about motivation. And then maybe go to Perplexity and ask Perplexity those questions because you want answers right away, and I'm not going to see your questions right away. So spend the next couple minutes writing down questions and asking Perplexity for answers. You got 2 minutes. When you hear me speaking, come back to the video. All right. Start putting questions in the chat.
Amen.
Looks like I- All right. Seeing some great questions coming here. All right. So let's kind of start reviewing for a minute here. I will spotlight myself for this part. Okay, so how do we get our students motivated? Um, the trick is to amp it up, and AMP is AMP, which stands for something. Think to yourself for a moment. You don't have to put it in the chat. What do you think AMP and P stand for? I'm going to tell you the answer. See if you got it correct. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Perfect.
People feel more motivated when we give them more autonomy, which means giving them more choice. Um, when we give them more ideas about how they're doing, so that just like in a video game, you know how it's exciting to like you've leveled up, you're leveling up, you're leveling up. You have this real clear feeling that you're getting better. A lot of our students never get a clear feeling that they're getting better, even though they are, because we haven't made it super explicit, where they can really see it and maybe even track it. In some of my classes that I have with first year students, I have them every day kind of track what they learned, and they've got a little chart that so they can kind of see it going up. Seems to help a lot. So autonomy, mastery, and the P is purpose. What's the purpose? What's the point? Why are you asking them to do this thing? How will it help them now? Not, I mean, I think too often we're like, Trust me, it's going to help you in the future. Years from now, you'll be using this." We need to do a whole lot more around helping students understand why something needs to happen, why would be useful to them in the moment or, in a week. Now, some people who study motivation also include relatedness, and some people combine that with purpose. But how can you get students doing more where they feel like it's important to do something because they're working on a team and they want to, help the others on their team? So that can be a big piece too. Autonomy, mastery, purpose. Um, and that is what's going to get students past that I don't care stage. But here's a trick that helps a lot. It's best if students persuade themselves rather than you saying, here's why this is important, getting them to brainstorm why this might be important and how it might connect to things in their lives. That's going to help a lot more. So I think one of the things you've got to think about is helping them convince themselves. Um, let's see, Brooke says, do you feel like it's weird that a lot of schools focus on extrinsic motivation, even though we learned in other classes that research shows intrinsic motivation is what matters or sticks? Yes, I think it's very weird. Very weird. In fact, I think that the weirdest thing across education and way beyond is how we know things. There's research that shows all these different things,
Rainy Daisy.
and yet we don't do them. Or we see other countries doing something and it's like it was working amazing. And we're like, nah, we're just going to keep doing the thing we're doing that isn't working. Um, I put this in one of your upcoming modules, but there's something called the recidivism rate. It's how often do people who have been imprisoned return after being released? And you don't want people to keep coming back to prison. You want them to get healed and never come back. And in Scandinavian countries, the recidivism rate is around 20%. Only about 20% of people who are imprisoned end up back in prison again. In the United States, it's 70%. You would think we would look at that and say to ourselves, let's let's see if we can figure out how to do what they're doing. But no. And again, in Dan Pink's TED Talk, he makes such a solid, solid argument that um, that extrinsic motivators almost never work unless you're trying to get students to, like if you're trying to get students to stuff envelopes for you, um, feel free to bribe them with pizza. But if they're doing anything that requires thought and or creativity or higher order thinking, using extrinsic motivators are just going to make it worse. I don't know what to tell you. It's just education is full of examples just like that, where we know something and then we proceed not to do what we know. If I knew the answer to that, I would be worth a lot of money. Um, so let's see. I kind of answered, I think, most of Angela's questions. How do we respond when the attitude is that they don't really care? I think that's where really focusing on the relatedness piece is going to make a big difference, and specifically their relationship with you. Because when students have a relationship with you and they don't want to disappoint you, they are so much more likely to go along with something for a few minutes. And then once they are going along with it, if it's a well-designed activity that's interesting and there's some autonomy, mastery, and purpose built in, then their own motivation kicks in and they'll often keep doing it. But the trick is how to get them to start, right? And some of that is, convincing themselves. And some of that is having that's where the relationship really matters. What are some of your favorite ways to get students those micro yeses in order to help them build momentum? Yes, so that's we're kind of starting to move now into questions about procrastination, which is good. Um, Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I wish I had started with procrastination and then moved into motivation, because really that's how it happens in your classroom. Students are basically kind of procrastinating, right? Like if they're not starting something, if you've introduced an activity and they're not getting started on it, that's really a kind of procrastination. It's not how we think about it. We think about it like, I'm watching a TV show and I can't seem to stop, even though I know I should be doing something else. But even that, not starting something in class is a kind of procrastination. And so sometimes I'll have students do things like, okay, this works particularly well in middle school. Um, Everybody just pick up your pen or pencil and just wave it around. Okay, now the pen or pencil is at least in their hand. I've made great strides. Um, okay, now I want everyone to put the tip of it, down on your paper. And then when I ask them to write something, they're far more likely to write than if I had just said write something. Why? Because they've gotten some micro yeses. Sometimes I do it, I want them to stand up and go do something. And so I have them, all right, everybody point your feet, you know, towards the board that you're going to go to. Okay, everyone stand up, So again, micro yeses. I think the trick though is to not keep using the same ones all the time, but to come up with a wide variety of micro yeses. So students kind of don't see it coming. Yeah. All right. So we've started talking about not motivation, procrastination. Everyone start thinking about what questions you want to ask about procrastination. And again, I'm going to put you in breakout rooms for 4 minutes to brainstorm questions. And when you come back, make sure you know who's going to write which ones in the chat. I'm just going to put you in your same breakout groups. Those of you who are watching via video, um, now would be the time to go into the Google Doc you have open and start again, same as last time, brainstorm a few questions, take those to Perplexity, see what the answers are, and when you hear me speaking again, come back to the video. Audrey, can you get into your breakout group?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I am driving home from VBS, so I just joined to listen, but I can't do anything on there
Yes,
right now.
yes.
I'll be home
Agreed.
soon, but I am just trying to listen. I just can't participate with that.
Agreed. Do
I am
not
so
try to.
sorry. I'm just trying to listen so I can learn, but I'm sorry that I'm not able to participate on that, but I am driving.
All righty. All right, everybody, start start putting things in the chat. Questions about procrastination. I see some good ones coming. All right. So, question. To what extent does mood and or energy affect procrastination? I'm willing to bet that you all, from looking at your own lives, know that it plays a really big role. Um, the more tired you are, the more likely you are to procrastinate. Now, the why of that, interestingly enough, is what we're going to be talking about later in the class period. Um, but also, if you're just in a bad mood, you've had a bad day, obviously it's going to be a lot harder. There's some really interesting research that showed that people have a lot harder time. Well, here's a better way to put it. You actually like have a set amount of willpower that you can use each day. Um, and if you've already used a lot of it, then it's harder to come up with more. Um, and so, for example, if you have had a really difficult day and have just, had to spend the whole day biting your tongue, um, when you want to say something to someone else, it's much harder, for example, to resist a cookie because you've used it up. So, yeah, mood and energy makes a really big difference. And we're going to get a little bit more on why later. How has the procrastination rates changed since COVID, due to an increase in phone addictions? Oh, it's changed a lot. And I would say it's not exactly that procrastination is worse. It's that focus is worse. And working on something often requires focus. It depends on what you're about to do. If you're about to do something that requires very little focus, it's probably going to be easier to do. But something that does require focus, um, that's what the past years have eaten away. Um, COVID didn't help. Social media doesn't help. A lot of problems here. So that's why I really think we need to be thinking more about how to help students learn focus and develop focus, because that's the piece that's really missing in that particular puzzle. Um, Things we typically procrastinate are things that we feel are overwhelming and hard. So true. How do we break into smaller pieces so they don't feel overwhelming or make it more appealing? So, um, anything that is big is going to feel that way. There's some things that you need to do that are small. And you still don't want to do, you might still procrastinate, but obviously you're going to procrastinate more about cleaning out your garage than you are about just going to wash a few dishes. Um, and absolutely the answer in that case is this. Tell yourself, I'm going to do it for 5 minutes. I'm going to do it for 5 minutes. The vast majority of the time, if you do something for 5 minutes, you keep doing it. But you can give yourself permission not to, so that you can use that trick over and over, knowing that, if you really aren't up to it, you can step away. But most of the time, I'm telling you, it's definitely true with me. Things that I don't want to do, if I can get myself to do them for 5 minutes, then I'm in. Why? Actually, I'm not going to answer that. I want you to think in your head for a minute. Why would that be true? Why is it true that if you just do something for 5 minutes, generally you'll keep doing it? Think of the answer. The answer is because we know that motivation doesn't kick in immediately. It takes a few minutes to kick in. So if you just do something for a few minutes, often the motivation kicks in. You're like, oh, I'm doing it. Yay, go me. And you keep going. Yeah. Um, why is that we typically, my eyesight is so bad. Why is it that we typically don't want to procrastinate on the things daily, like showers, brushing our teeth? What is the mental mechanism that makes those choices? Yes. So, um, your brain doesn't even have to think about those things. They're so automated that you just do it. Yeah, it's fantastic. Um, gotta love it. So what else do we have here? And that's why it's so important to automate. The more things you can automate, um, the the smoother life tends to go. There's this really famous story about this super famous neuroscientist who ate the same thing every day and wore the same clothes every day, so that those were things that he didn't have to spend any time thinking about, so he could save up all his brain energy for the amazing thinking he was going to do, which he did. Um, Last question. What are some ways that you stop or trick your brain from protecting itself in order to get started on a task? I think that's where the micro steps often come into play. That's how you trick yourself. Um, but sometimes what can also work is to reward yourself. Like, if I do this for 5 minutes, then I get to, have this thing later or do this thing later. The problem with that makes me worry a little bit, with rewarding yourself, is what's the reward? Because if you start rewarding yourself with food, that doesn't add up to good things later. Then you start to think of food as a reward, and not good. Um, if you think, well, I'm going to purchase something, again, that's something you don't want to think of as a reward, because then you start purchasing things not because you really want or need them, but as to get that dopamine release of reward. So I think you have to be really careful about what you're going to reward yourself with. Maybe it's going to be something like, later I'll take a walk, or later I'll call a friend. Things that you enjoy doing, but that are also really good for you. And if you did more of them, it would be fine. Yeah. All right. So let's move into this main concept for the night. And this is a topic we're going to look at a little bit later in the semester. And I wanted to just kind of introduce it now and get us thinking about it because it's just so important. And that is developing what I would call well-being in ourselves. You might also think of it as like psychological fitness. How do we develop that in ourselves and in our students? And interestingly, at Georgia College, we have a huge um, like 5-year project that we're just starting right now that's about doing that for every student at the university. How are we going to help every student at the university increase their sense of well-being and psychological fitness? So um, this is this is something I know a good bit about. And I can't remember if I told you the story. I think maybe I did, but that I decided to get certified in this area. It's called Applied Positive Psychology and in education. And the program started in January 2020. And of course, a few months later, that's when COVID hit. And I was like, I could not have taken this at a better time. I actually have things that I can do to help other people. Man, it was great. So Let's get started on this. You'll want something to write on and something to write with, so you can just jot things as we go. I will send this PowerPoint via email so that you have it later. Feel free to use it with your students, with your colleagues, however you want. All right. Give me a second to. It's hard because the peruse all controls overlap the PowerPoint controls. I tell you. Okay. So we're looking at this idea of boosting well-being in order to boost learning. And here's my great hope that I've hoped for years, ever since I started learning about this. My great hope is that teachers everywhere will be able to address emotional roadblocks to student success as well as practical ones. We often think about the practical ones, but we very rarely think about what emotional roadblocks might be in the way and how to remove those. And I hope teachers everywhere will be able to make a lasting impact on students' well-being through these small, impactful, flourishing strategies. Everything I'm about to show you tonight and in the modules that are coming up are little things you can do that have a big impact. They're things that don't take up much time, aren't hard to learn. Amazing. So I want you to think for a minute. On a scale of 1 to 5, write this on your paper. A number 1 to 5. How much effort would you be willing to put in over this next hour to feel better prepared to meet these goals? So give yourself a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 would be the highest. And let's see what happens. So I want you to take notes, and I'm going to have you, as I'm talking, I'm going to have you take notes on paper. But every once in a while, I'm going to have you stop and do what's called a brain dump, where I send you into the Google Doc that you opened and have you just write everything that you can remember, to help, solidify it. But here's an interesting thing. Taking notes keeps you in the moment and keeps you focused, and more focus leads to more joy and more engagement. And as you think of questions, make sure to jot those down. And every once in a while, I'll give you a chance to ask some questions. And know that we'll be going into breakout groups throughout. So I've told you that the whole point is to use these little strategies. When would you do that? Well, they're great to use before class even starts, like right at the beginning. A wonderful way to open a class is by using a strategy that will help students feel, happier or feel like they've got more well-being. That often puts them in the mood to, want to do more work with you. Sometimes they can work as a great brain break. We know that the brain can't focus too much for too long before it starts to just be too much. So, a lot of these strategies I think you would find could be great for a brain break. And there's some that I just love using at the end of classes so that when students leave, the last thing that they think about from my class is something like uplifting. How long will these take? Some of these take as little as 1 minute. I would say the most one would take would be 5, or maybe a few might take 10 minutes, but most 2, 3 minutes. I mean, these strategies are small. And you might say, well, how can we incorporate them without it seeming too weird? Like if you teach math, aren't your students going to think it's weird that you're teaching them like well-being strategies? And my answer is, I thought that too. Loads of faculty who I've worked with thought it, and then they started doing it, and all what they found was the students just really appreciated it and didn't find it weird at all. They just thought it was lovely. So I want to start with just a few foundational ideas that kind of form the basis for everything we're about to talk about. And one is that our brains lie to us a lot, a whole lot. Um, there's this really well-known podcast. Some of you may have heard it. It's called the Happiness Lab, and it's been, you know, releasing podcast episodes for years. It's a professor from Yale who does it, and she always opens with the line. It's longer than this, but part of what she says is, "But what if our brains are lying to us?" Apparently, our brains lie to us so much that she can do, I don't know, she's probably done over 100 episodes that all have something to do with how our brains lie to us. So, our brains lie to us a lot. Talking back to our brains is crucial. And so many of these strategies, maybe almost all of them, have to do with how we talk back to what our brains are saying. And we have more control than we think. And that is a message I really want your students to hear. You too, but you might already know that. Your students probably don't. So I have three questions for you. Just jot really brief answers on your paper. How is your brain like an elephant? What does the more ancient part of your brain want? And then true or false, the voice you hear in your head is mostly an important source of truth. So I'm going to be quiet for about 30 seconds and let you answer these questions. Pre-questions. All right, let's take a look. So we know that the brain started out much smaller than it is. Um, and that over time, our brains grew and changed, evolved. Um, and so at this point, we have a brain that kind of, in some ways, has two parts. Part that is called the lower brain. It's the more ancient part, and then the higher brain, which is more recent and more rational. So your lower brain, people used to call it the lizard brain. You may have heard that before. But psychologists decided that maybe lizard wasn't the best metaphor because here's the thing about your lower brain. It is powerful and it is difficult to control. Now, let's face it, a lizard is not powerful and not all that difficult to control. But while your brain is like an elephant, powerful and difficult to control, it is possible to control it. It's just not easy. And that's very true of the lower brain. So, what does this lower brain think about? What does it want? Well, remember, it evolved when humans, lived in on the prairie, in the jungles. And so here is what the elephant says and what the elephant wants. The elephant wants you to eat sweet and fatty foods. It wants you to conserve your energy. It wants you to believe that danger is everywhere and that you should be afraid all the time. It doesn't want you to feel too confident, and it wants you to fit in no matter what. Why does it want those five things? Well, because back when that part of the brain evolved, it was important. Those are all things that would keep you alive in the deserts, in the forests, because you didn't often find sweet or fatty food and you needed it. So when you came across it, you should eat all of it. Um, you needed to make sure you weren't too worn out because if you were attacked, you needed to be able to run or fight. You needed to be constantly wary and paying attention because you lived in a place where literally huge, dangerous animals could very well attack and eat you. Um, and so it didn't want you to feel too confident. And your elephant brain needs you to fit in with others because back when our ancestors were living in deserts or in the forests and jungles, if you got thrown out of your tribe, you probably would not live. You certainly wouldn't be able to pass on your genes. So it's your elephant really wants you to be a people pleaser. But think about now how all the things that the elephant wanted back then that were so important back then, almost all of them aren't necessarily the best thing now. Yeah, that our brain isn't quite working for us because it evolved in a different time and place. And sometimes that elephant, your lower brain, generates random thoughts. And especially when it isn't preoccupied, like when you're maybe just driving in the car or taking a shower or trying to fall asleep, you get a lot of random neuronal firing. And that can cause your brain to say weird things, random things, upsetting things. And something that I think is very important is that you know that everyone's brain does this. And I want your students to know that because not all students understand that everyone's brain does this. Um, the most important people on the planet, their brains do it too. And the really important thing is to recognize that it is not the truth. That when your brain says this crappy stuff to you, doesn't mean it's the truth. One of the questions I asked you earlier was the question of, is the voice that speaks to you, you know, important source of truth? Well, there's kind of two voices. One is what philosophers have called the still small voice. That's a voice that when you quiet yourself down and relax and just really bring your reasoning into play and think about things seriously, that voice, the still small voice, is often very truthful. But that just your voice that's just chattering away all freaking day. That one, again, is mostly lying to you. So I'm going to move you into groups. I'll put you into different groups so you get to meet more people. But I want you to talk about the three questions. Make sure everyone feels clear on how your brain is like an elephant, what that part of your brain wants, and whether or not that voice is an important source of truth. So let's get those groups open. And hang on just a second.
Dr. Albee, is there anything that we need to come back with from our group?
That is an excellent question, and the answer is no. All right, see you back in a few.
Thank you, ma'am.
Those of you who are watching on video, take some time to go to your Google page and um, discuss these questions with yourself. And when you hear me speaking again later, come back. Welcome back. All right. So, yeah, we're about to head into the strategies. I promised you a lot of small, potent strategies, and I'm going to give you a quick taste of them, like have you actually try them out for yourself. Um, and it's going to be a quick taste. So, I'm not often going to be able to give you as much time as I would probably give if I was using just a single one of these in a course. And your goal is to decide which are the best fit for your context, and then tweak them to fit your class. I don't expect you to try to do all of these. I think you should pick a few that work well for you and use those. So, earlier, I told you that you have more control than you think. And I think that before you start using these strategies with your students, you should show them this slide to help them see that, yes, it is true that your level of happiness, I prefer the term well-being, about half of it is genetic, is your biology, is inherited. But about 40% of it is within your control, which is huge. So there you go. And also, before I start using these with students, I like to talk about the elephant. I like to make sure that they understand that that negative self-talk is common. It helps lay the groundwork. So if you're going to use these, I would do the same kind of thing you just saw me do with you, just, maybe a little bit more, um, you know, like geared towards whatever grade you teach. All right. So here's a way you can help students and yourself talk back to the elephant. Because remember, that's one of the things that's most key here is talking back. So there are four S's. This just helps you or your students remember what your choices are. You can talk back in a way that is strong, soft, silly, or silent. Strong is if you say something, usually not out loud. I mean, if you're alone, feel free. Um, Strong would be something like back off. You're making matters worse. I literally think of an elephant, and imagine what I'm saying to that elephant. You can speak softly, like, I know you're trying to help, but let me handle this. Um, One of my favorites is to be just a little silly. It kind of breaks the control that negative voice has. And so my favorite thing to say is elephant, hush. You need to say it just like that. Elephant, hush. Because once you've said that, you know, you're kind of laughing at yourself, and whatever the elephant was saying just seems like, yeah, doesn't matter so much. But silence is also an option. Like, if you can start to imagine that it's like the pop-ups on your computer and you just, X out of them, or like like if you had a radio sitting next to you and it was telling you that you were ugly, would you believe it? I hope not. You'd be like, it's just people on the radio talking. It's not me. So I want you to think for a minute, jot this down on your piece of paper. Which is your go-to, or maybe you don't talk back to your elephant at all. That would be interesting. How do you tend to talk back? I'll be quiet for a minute, let you write. So a lot of how you choose which strategies to use depend on what your students' issues are. I'll also say that often I teach these strategies to the whole class. But sometimes, like a student will meet one-on-one with me in my office and have some kind of issue. And so sometimes I teach them a strategy there in my office, where they'll stick around after class and I'll say, all right, you've explained what the problem you're having. Would you mind if I taught you a strategy? And they're always like, you go for it. And we do. And in that case, it helps to know which of these six problems the students are having. And we're going to look at each of them separately and look at which strategies go with which issues. And we're starting with catastrophic thinking. So take a minute and jot down some ideas. First of all, what do you think catastrophic thinking is? And how do you think people who control it well do that? What do you think it is? And how do you think people who control it well do it? And be quiet for about 15 seconds and let you write. So I'm going to show you a strategy that the researchers who, tried to study all the different ways that we could go about doing this, and this is the one that they found worked the best for people. First of all, here's what catastrophic thinking is. So, for example, you might think, no one asked any questions after my presentation. They must have hated it. Or that mole doesn't look like, oh, what if it's terminal cancer? Or if I fail this test, oh my gosh, my entire future will be ruined. Catastrophic thinking is when you think a basic thought and then your brain just goes to the worst case possible immediately. And you don't even, it's out of your control. It just leaps to, what if it's cancer? Yeah. And so the strategy to use when this happens is called worst case, best case, most likely case. And here's how it works. You don't have to generate the worst case because your brain did that for you. And literally, you can't stop it. Um, Even if you get good at something like this, your brain's going to keep jumping to the worst case because it's just what the elephant does. But pretty quickly, you can start to not follow that. Um, so your brain generates the worst case. What then you can do is come up with a best case scenario. And you can even make it so unrealistically best case that it's kind of funny. Like with the mole, I might say to myself, you know, actually, some models have a mole and it's what made them famous. It's a beauty mark. So that might be the best case scenario. So, worst case scenario, it's cancer. Best case scenario, it's making me more beautiful. What is the most, then once you've done that, your brain has started to calm down a little bit and you can come up with the most likely case. The most likely case is that it is not cancer, but you can say to yourself, but it would not be a bad idea for me to have a skin check if I haven't had one in the past year. That would be smart. I think I'm going to go make that phone call right now. So, brain generates the worst case. You come up with a funny best case scenario. Then you come up with the most likely case. And then at that point, you can make a calm and rational plan. Here's another one. Worst case. No one asked any questions after my presentation. They must have hated it. Best case scenario, they were so amazed that they were speechless, and afterwards they probably talked about it at lunch. Most likely case, there are some good ideas, but maybe it was a little dull, like most presentations. So then my plan might be, okay, for my next presentation, I'll shorten it, I'll add more visuals. I'll incorporate more opportunities for people to interact. Hopefully you're starting to get the pattern here. So I want you to try one. Um, Here's the worst case scenario. You think to yourself, if I don't pass this test, I won't be able to get where I want to go with my career. Probably you all have felt this, and it might have been because of the GACE test. Um, Even if you've already taken it, I wouldn't be surprised if you had that feeling before you did it. If you haven't taken it yet, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a thought that has crossed your mind. So, your brain has gone to worst case. Take a minute. What's the best case? And remember, make it wildly best case. Um, Unrealistically best case is fine, funny, good. Take a moment and write that. What's the best case? Now, what's the most likely case? And now that you've thought about this a little further, maybe like what's your plan? So, for example, you might have said the best case scenario is you get every single one right, and they invite you um, to come up front in front of everybody in the school, and they tell everybody about how you got the only perfect score in Georgia. Okay. Most likely case, um, you probably will pass the test. And even if you don't, you'll know better how to prepare for it and you'll probably pass the second time. What's your plan? Okay, so maybe I'm going to study a little harder. Um, Maybe I will talk to one of my professors about how I could study. Of course, if you're science, you could ask Dr. Roman Oliver, and if you're math or business, you could ask Dr. Kang. If you're social studies, you could ask Dr. Merritt. I do, art and English language arts and world languages, so that might be your plan. So I'm going to come back to the same two questions. Now, do you know what catastrophic thinking is? And do you know a good way to control it? Now you've got answers. Go you. Okay. Remember, there are six different issues. Catastrophic thinking is one. This is the second one. And after we do this one, I'll send you back in your groups to talk about it. This is what I call in the moment anxiety. Like a student is in your class, and all of a sudden they just feel really anxious. Or this could happen to you. You're just in the grocery store and you start to feel really anxious, or you name the place. We all have that sudden onset, out of nowhere kind of anxiety. What can you do about it? I've got several different possibilities for you here, all well researched. Um, the first one is called sense tuning. And what you do, and I want you to actually do this right now, you let your eyes fall on something near you with no judgment. You just look at it. You really look at it for two long, slow breaths. So find the thing you're going to look at and breathe in and out. In and out. Now pick out a sound where you are and really focus on that sound for two long, slow breaths. In and out. In and out. And then you feel something like often I just feel my own hand. Um, or you could feel, your clothing or your desk or pen. Pick something to just really feel for two long, slow breaths. And then you just repeat that a few times. What I love about sense tuning is you could do it anywhere and people won't know you're doing it, which for students, if you're in a class, it's helpful to be able to do something that no one can tell you're doing. It, of course, how it helps you is if you're paying close attention to things, then it's keeping your brain from running away with you or keeping your brain from chattering horrible thoughts. It's just keeping you on what you're seeing, on what you're hearing, on what you're feeling. Very, very powerful. Seems simple, but I'm telling you, a lot of research has been done on it and it really works. Let's look at a couple other possibilities if you just start to feel anxious. This is a method called havening, and I'm going to, I think, stop share so I can demonstrate these. So there's three types. The one that definitely most people find work that's the best is arm havening. So you put your hands on the top of your shoulders and then you just stroke down to your elbows or a little below. And then you come back up and down. Now, of course, the problem with this one is it looks a little unusual. If the student did this in class, if everyone was aware of why, it might be fine. But sometimes if a student needs to, I'll just say, like go to the restroom and they can do it in there for a little bit. It's not super weird, but it's a little bit odd. So there's two other kinds that are a little less noticeable. One is your face, and you just kind of put your hands together in the center and then stroke out. Very relaxing. Some people just naturally have figured this out and do it, and they don't even realize that it's a thing. And then the one that's hardest to see and maybe the easiest to do is to just kind of stroke your hands together. You could do it, in your lap, and then people wouldn't see that you were doing it. But these kind of strokes are really soothing. They kind of mimic often how loved ones touch us, especially perhaps our parents when we were young. Um, and so I love to teach these to students. Havening. All right, let's go back here and look at one more. So this is called the physiological sigh. And now that if you've never heard of this word, now that I've taught it to you, I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing it. Uh, I just find I hear people talking about it on podcasts and so forth. And a friend of mine who is I can't think of the word for this, a breathing therapist, a lung therapist, basically a person who, if someone's had, for example, issues with their lungs or breathing, or they've had surgery that involved their lungs or breathing, she's a therapist who helps them. And she says when she does this, she calls it smell the roses, blow out the candle. But basically, what you're going to do is take a deep breath through your nose and then without breathing out, you're going to take a second breath. It's weird because you think you've breathed in all the way, but then you can take in another breath on top of that. And then you purse your lips and blow out through your mouth, long, slow, really get it all out. What a lot of people don't realize is that, when people tell you to breathe deeply, like if you're, upset or something, people get really focused on breathing in a lot of air, but it's really the breathing out of the air that is the more important step. And sometimes people just keep like, breathing in, and start hyperventilating. So you really have to think about the out breath. And again, I'm going to uh, stop the share so I can demonstrate this. So I'm going to breathe in deeply through my nose and then again, and then purse my lips and breathe it out. So here I go. I think what you'll find is that second breath just fills a part of your lungs that almost never gets filled. It just there's something about that second breath that just really feels good. And then again, that just really pushing out all that air, getting a lot of that stale air out, really, helps your body get some for real oxygen in. All right. So I think it's time for a breakout. We just looked at two different things. Um, we talked about ways to handle catastrophic thinking. Well, we looked at one important way, and then we looked at three ways to um, um, handle in the moment anxiety. So, step one, before we go to breakout rooms, I want you to do a brain dump. What this means is you're going to open up the Google Doc, and for 1 minute, I'm going to put time on my watch, write everything you can think of about what I just said. Try to list all four methods, explain what they are, just everything. Are you ready? Go to your Google Doc, start brain dumping now. Take about 30 more seconds. Keep brain dumping. All right, come back to the Zoom and I'm going to send you into breakout rooms. Putting the questions in the chat for you to talk about. What do you remember about the four strategies you just learned about? How might you personally use them or teach them to your students? And which strategies are you most excited about trying? All right, I'll see you back here in 4 minutes. Go forth. Cash, are you able to get into your breakout room? Those of you who are watching the recording, make sure that you go to your Google Doc and answer those 4 questions. Again, they are, what do you remember about the 4 strategies you just learned about? How might you personally use them or teach them to your students? And which strategy are you most excited about trying? And in about 3 minutes, when you hear me speaking again, come on back.